Let me start off. I was going to come on to Gangster Paradise. Anyone remember that tune? Because it was an audio clue to pick the year, because I'm here to talk about the evolution of compliance. So we need a start year. So I want you to try and guess the year. I'm going to give you some clues here. Google did not exist in the year in question. Okay. Apple was broke. They had no money. Steve Jobs wasn't there, and he was on his way back, so that's another clue for you. Amazon had just launched their first version of selling books online, all that good stuff. Pizza Hut did their first ever online order via email, because the internet was obviously fairly new and fairly embryonic at that stage. Anybody got any ideas at this stage what year I'm talking about? 94. We got a 94. Okay. Okay. We're getting close. So this fella was 11, because there was no Facebook. Okay. Last clue. It was our first piece of European legislation that came in around compliance and data security and everything else like that. So the year's 1995 when we got Toy Story and all the rest, so it was pretty close. So when you think of that, right, 1995, internet just starting off, we're on our 28K modems, we're finding a way in the internet, the cloud wasn't really there, everything else like that, and you're trying to work that out, but the legislation that came in then didn't take into account things like the cloud, things like Facebook, social networks. Didn't understand anything about that. And obviously, this piece of legislation was upgraded to what we know today as GDPR. That was in 2018, it became GDPR. So, look, my name is Paul Dwyer. I am working in the world of cybersecurity and risk for over 30 years. These days, you'll hear me going on about a thing called DORA an awful lot, because it's a catalyst. It's a very important piece of legislation that we all need to embrace and to understand, whether we're protecting and taking care of our clients, or whether we're part of society, because it does have that kind of impact of what will go across. So as I talk about the evolution of compliance today, I want to talk about that starting block of 1995, where we are today and where it's going and why it's so important. So to put some context on this, I often talk, for those of you who heard me talk before, about the fact that we live in two worlds. We live in the digital cyber world, and we also live in the real physical world. And when we try and do business in the real physical world, or we're dealing with crime in the real physical world, there's laws, there's social norms, there's consequences. But the digital world is completely different. We see this with innovation and evolving all the time, with AI and everything else like that. And quite frankly, there's little to no consequences or laws to cyber criminal activity. It's very difficult, despite the best efforts of law enforcement internationally, in dealing with all that. So we're dealing with a different kind of threat vector, a different kind of animal, if you like, when we're dealing with those things. And it's the same to do with resilience. I want to talk about resilience as well. But these two worlds are totally interconnected. I'm going to talk about global warming. These things are totally interconnected between the two worlds. Quick update first, or a quick snapshot in relation to cyber threat actors. And people think it's somebody stealing credit card details, it's someone stealing passwords and so on. All of the threat actor groups work together. They overlap like a Venn diagram. They all have a different objective, and they all do things in a different way in order to be able to do that. Okay? So your adversary, the person that you're trying to protect your organization against, these are the main groups, and not all of the groups, because I will talk about another group of kind of a subset of the insider group and people making mistakes, and why operational resilience is so important and so on. But I talk often about this group, and I'm not going to change the tone too much in today's briefing for the sake of time and everything else like that, but I want you to understand that you're on a mission when you work in cybersecurity to protect against cyber evil. I'm not talking about people who think this is a clean crime to steal data and sell data and so on. I'm talking about the darkest of dark actors that work together within that ecosystem, whether they're trafficking children, whether it's organ harvesting, whatever it happens to be. And I'll leave the conversation at that point, but I'm talking about that if you're defending and you're preventing cyber crimes and those kind of activities, you're stopping really, really evil behavior. And I won't change the tone too much to say about that. And for every organization, they have this challenge where there's more and more legislation all the time. And ironically, something like DORA is trying to simplify life. It's trying to harmonize this confusion, this myriad, this absolute plethora of things being thrown at IT departments. I've seen statistics that talk about over 40% of IT time going on compliance assignments and trying to work out, why am I being asked the same thing in a different way? Do I have endpoint protection? And every standard and every regulation they look at is asking them the same thing, but in a slightly different way. So this is a challenge for us. As you know, through COVID, we obviously saw that so much embracing of the digital society and online behaviors. But let me be very clear, Europe is all about creating the digital society. We're going to have our digital euro, that's on its way. Everything, all the smart money is looking at what's coming down the track here, which is more and more EU legislation. It's all well thought out, it's all harmonized. I talked in the previous years here about the kind of funding that's available and everything else like that. But if you're not selling or providing or implementing services and controls that are aligned with these controls, you're missing out, and you're potentially operating illegally as well. So it's really, really important to understand what these things are. So again, a quick overview on this just for the limit of time. Look at the top of this infographic. What we have here is a business model. Every organization has a unique business model. And it depends on ICT, information communication technology requirements. So do they use the cloud? Do they use servers? Do they use mobile apps? What do they use? And all that kind of technology. And whatever they're doing to support that, they have to do in line with business, legal, and regulatory requirements. That's the boring, pedestrian reality of the cool, sexy world of cybersecurity. We have to make sure we're doing things legally. And it's different in every country. What you can do in Ireland, you can't necessarily use as a control in another country. So you have to be very, very au fait with this. And that means communication, cooperation, interaction between your legal departments, the compliance departments, GRC, the IT providers, the developers, everything else like that. And that's where I'm setting the scene around DORA. But this is the reality, guys, which is innovation is always going to outpace regulation. It's always trying to keep up, and it's not able to, right? Because we're innovating. You know, the AI Act is on its way. You know, all of these things are being developed as we speak, but it's always going to catch up. The other key point on this to remember is that it's always going to be a minimum baseline. You're not going to find something in a compliance standard from a regulator that is so out there and so well thought out and so mature and so detailed. You go, whoa, that's unreal. We never thought of putting in that control. This is generally kind of stuff that we should have in place. You know, the ability to have confidentiality, integrity, availability, and authenticity around our data and data access within systems. So when we look at the digital economy, again, I love my Venn diagrams, so we've got a Venn diagram here, and we look at the whole idea of trust, technology, and innovation, because they're the three things that are going to be able to pull together to be successful in the digital economy. And all of those three things depend on resilience, okay, which is different from security. Resilience is different. And I'll go a little bit deeper on why that is. And one thing around, when we look at trust signals, so this was the driver that Michael sent for me this morning, and I see there's a few trust signals that we're dealing with here. Would you get in that Uber? Like, you wouldn't. Like, you could see that there's something clearly wrong here. And the whole thing about being successful in the digital economy is to be able to get people to trust you. So, when trust is this biological, chemically based thing within us as human beings. You can have two twins that have different levels of trust and their ability to trust things. But in a digital economy, we're trying to establish that online. If you think of back in the good old days when there was these big glorious banks and you went in and the marble floor and everything, and you trusted that they had these big buildings. Again, in the physical world, we went in, we saw the bank, we saw the people, we trusted that they have our money. Now, you trust an app on your phone that these people have your pension or your wages who's going into an account or whatever. You're trusting a logo. And that's the secret to success in the digital economy. Can you get them to trust you and your logo? And that's all about being able to provide that digital trust in this environment. So as I say, defense is great and cybersecurity is absolutely important, and it's crucial that we have defense in place. But that goes back to this whole premise, which is completely outdated, that, keep the bad guys out, nothing will ever happen. But the reality is when we get into this, it's about resilience. It's about being able to withstand when something goes wrong and when something bad happens. It's really important to be able to do that. And we have to factor in even things, again, in the physical world, like global warming or the warming in this room. Who's going to fall asleep or drop dead first? But we've got global warming, and we have our example here. And it's about those kind of factors we need now to consider. So we're going beyond a hacker breaking into a system. We're going beyond defenses. And we're saying, operationally, can we be resilient in this place? So hopefully the audio is working now. No, it's not. So I'll do my best impression from Home Alone, which is, the French have a word for you, which is les incompetents, right? And that would have been funny if the audio was working, so we can all pretend that was funny for a second. Okay, cool. So, and the reality is that there will be this incompetent, there will be the people that make mistakes, there will be those kind of issues and so on. And we being the organisation that I work with, I'm president of the ICTTF, and we had the EU DORA summit on there a few weeks ago. And some of the comments came back where we were talking about DORA, and we were talking about the fact that a lot of it is about cybersecurity and resilience and using this cybersecurity framework and all this is great. But the reality is, something like DORA, the Digital Operation Resilience Act, is about preventing other kinds of things happening as well around digital systems. So here we look at this guy that's stuck in jail, and we'll look about why was this guy stuck in jail. Well, in 2012, Royal Bank of Scotland, or Ulster Bank, they had a batch scheduler upgrade that failed. And what that resulted in was an outage from the 19th of June to July the 12th. That's a long time. Now look at that from a regulator's perspective, or even common sense perspective, and say, well, you were doing an upgrade. What safeguards did you take? What was your rollback plan? Where's the change management? Where's all of those places? These are all parts of DORA that should be put in place. So it's not just about, the defenses. It's about making sure all of these parts are put in there as well. Millions of transactions failed, and the customer impact was people weren't able to buy their houses, people were stranded abroad. One guy in Mexico, they threatened to turn off his life support machine because he couldn't transfer over money. Because he was and to pay his bills, and his family couldn't transfer over the money. And one guy was stuck in jail because he couldn't pay fines, because he couldn't access his bank account. And that's the reality of that. For the bank, they got fined 42 million. That's a bad day. And it cost them 175 million in costs. That's probably conservative for what that incident cost. So somebody does an upgrade but didn't plan it properly operationally, and that's the result of what we're dealing with as a consequence. Now, this guy had an even worse day. Because I talked a promo video about a CIO getting a personal fine of £81,000. And this is the kind of things we're going to see within DORA, because there's personal consequences to not doing your job properly. And the consequences will be there. So in 2018, TSB, and you can read more about this story actually. William Fry did a good, the lawyers did a good paper on it to give you an overview of it. But a system migration failed, okay? Happens all the time. You're trying to migrate from one system to another, you're planning that out through the world we live in of digital transformation, everything else like that. This is what we're doing every day in the world of IT. We're migrating systems, we're moving off legacy systems, moving into cloud, whatever it happens to be. 232 days before they got their act together. So the PRA, the regulator in the UK, obviously we're not happy about this. Millions of customers got locked out of their accounts. Now, the financial impact, fined 48 million, again, that's a kick. Their costs were over 300 million, but 80,000 customers closed their accounts. 80,000 customers said, we've had enough of you. We don't trust you anymore. We're gone. We're going to somebody that we do trust. They went from a profit-making bank to a loss-making bank because one CIO did a crap job. That's the impact that it had on that organization. So how do we protect our ecosystem, our digital economy? Well, we rely on things like DORA. And DORA is well thought out. It's horrible, it's ugly, it's confusing, but it's good, right? It's got all the right kind of pieces in it. The kind of things that people who've worked in the world of IT and security have wanted. Clear lines of responsibility. The management board are responsible for all ICT risk, including with third parties. This stuff is called out. It's a legal obligation. So it's a game changer, and it's a catalyst. And for the rest of my career, I probably will be talking about DORA, because I see this as something that we wanted, whatever name it was going to have, but this is clearing out what we've been preaching about for years within the industry. Is it's a leadership issue. Leadership has to take it. You have to deal with all the moving parts in the organization, from legal to procurement to third parties. Make sure you're testing, make sure you're building in resilience. All of these things are built within DORA. So let's look at DORA in a nutshell here. So it is a regulatory initiative carried out by the EU to harmonise IT risk requirements across Europe. So it's not about making it more confusing, yet another piece of legislation. It means everybody can get on the same page. Everybody, large and small. If you look at the financial sector, it's made up of large entities, it's made of small entities, large suppliers, small suppliers, all interconnected. But that contagion effect, Christine Lagarde, before COVID even, was calling out that an attack on the financial sector in Europe could cause a liquidity crisis in Europe, because of that interconnection, interdependence between these pieces. So this is deadly important. You know, it's how we all operate at the end of the day. So who? Mainly the banking and financial services. There are some exclusions, but it also includes critical ICT providers, and there's lots of asterisks around that about who gets included and who doesn't get included, whatever. You need to be aware of this. If you're not, you're in the dark ages. You have to be working on DORA at the moment. Why? To provide institutions a harmonized way of dealing with this in a framework. And when you get into it, and you get past the legalese and you get past all the confusion language, it's actually a lot of it's just common sense. But now it's a legal obligation, common sense of running your systems. They'll carry out assessments, they'll validate, they'll monitor, manage, and they want to see assurance. Assurance is evidence. Evidence gives them confidence, gives them that assurance that they're looking for. So when I see people selling log management systems, I want to go, that's exactly what they need. They need evidence that you do what you say you do. If you're doing a system upgrade, they want to see that you follow the policies, the procedures. Where's the evidence you did that? If you do training, where's your training records? You have to provide evidence. Effectively, without using the wrong word, crime, but the penalty, if you like, is for not being able to prove that what you're doing is appropriate. It's not for things going wrong. You could have the best controls in the world in place, but if you can't prove they're in place and you're just showing them template policies and procedures, you're not churning and developing and delivering level 4 evidence, which is what they're looking for. So it came in January 16, 2023. That is not a mistype. 2023, it came into play. We delivered our DORA certified compliance specialist course within weeks of that, because we'd been working on DORA coming up over the previous year of that. Over 1,000 students now around the world have done that course and become professionals on that. 2-year implementation period. So here is the EU coming out and saying, we want you to follow all this. You've got 2 years, but by the way, during those 2 years, we're going to come out with what we call RTS, Regulatory Technical Standard Documents, which will be the meat on the bone. We're going to go into details. We're going to tell you exactly what is a critical incident, what's your notification time, how do you do testing, what do we expect, all of those kind of things. So we had our first batch of those that was delivered in January the 17th, and we're going to have our next batch on July 17th. So now we've lost monitors. Great. So we'll be on July 17th. And actually, we were running an event, DORA Day, on July 17th as well, so that'll be good. Each member has a competent authority. In Ireland, that would be the Central Bank of Ireland. And what they can carry out is fines, remedial actions, public reprimands, authorization, withdrawal, and compensation obligations, but personal liability. So if you're selling, and let's be honest, a lot of vendors in the room, if you're selling to people and they realize now as a CIO or a CISO or an IT security manager, whatever, they may have personal liability in this because their bosses do. At the end of the day, the management board of the bank is responsible for all ICT risk. All, including right through to the third parties. So the book stops with them. These are your key dates that you need to know about. Keep an eye on the ICTTF.org website, because we have events all based around this. As I mentioned, we just carried out the DORA Summit with people from all over Europe coming along that. And then I hear, but Paul, what about NIS 2? Well, NIS 2 is, DORA is leg specialist to that. That's just Latin meaning that if you're doing DORA, you're compliant with NIS. NIS comes under it, okay? There's only one show in town, and her name is DORA, right? And that's the way it works, right? So if you have multiple obligations, DORA is going to be the overarching one in that space. It's broken down to these 5 pillars. And the reason I'm going to show you this piece is to show you that this isn't straightforward, right? You've got these 5 areas. You've got ICT risk management. ICT, related incident management, classification and reporting. Huh? Why is it called that big long name? Digital operation resilience testing, managing of ICT third-party risk, information sharing arrangements. This was put together by a cadre of lawyers. So the language, you're not going to automatically and easily determine what the hell were they talking about there. So there is a challenge, and that's why we develop training courses and so on to bring people through and turn it into IT or cybersecurity speak so they understand where we're going from. That's what the document looks like when you expand it. The 5 pillars broken down into all these legal articles that you need to comply with. We've broken it into over 300 attestation points that a management board has to say they have in place before they can say they're compliant. I put in this just as an example of what the word resilience means. So you might have the word resilience in your head. That means I can detect an incident, I can respond, and I can recover. That's a nice definition of resilience. This is their definition of resilience. Look how long-worded it is. The ability of a financial entity to build, assure, and review its operational integrity and reliability by ensuring either directly or indirectly through the use of services provided by ICTTF. That's it, right? And every management board has to prove they're doing that with all their critical and important functions. This is a sales catalyst. This is a solution catalyst, and it's an opportunity to take a fresh view into the world of what you're doing around cybersecurity and so on. So over the decades of working, I could always see there's this loggerhead between security and compliance. We're doing this for security, we're doing this for compliance because we have to. Oh, which one should we do and which is going to be better? Where does the budget go? Where does the resource go? How do we do this? Pivot into a risk-centric approach. DORA is based on what's called the proportionality principle. Understand your risk level and appropriately apply the mitigation or control to mitigate that risk. Proportionality principle. Okay? Very, very important. Great for explaining to clients why your solution is the most adequate one, why the one they have may not be cutting the mustard in relation to what's going on. This is a leadership's role. They are responsible. I will keep saying that and keep repeating that because once the leaders understand this. I talked to a company that's $1 billion company a few weeks ago, and their global CISO was on the call as well, and they thought DORA was a pen testing regulation. There is a piss-poor job being done on communicating this out to even the financial sector of what their obligations are. And on the 17th of January next year, it is the law, and that's it. End of story. And if you see any of my talks, we've got stuff up on ICTTF.org, you'll see I go through where the Central Bank of Ireland are talking about pragmatism, practicality, but the deadlines are not moving and you have to have everything in place. Now, dates are important. 18th of April 1949, I will give a free copy of my book if anybody knows what happened. Yo, who said that? Good man, you get the free book, right? So we became a republic. So dates are important. So the two dates I want you to know in relation to something like DORA, 17th of July 2024 is the second and final batch of these RTS technical standards, the meat on the bone with the specifics around what's happening. And finally, January 17, 2025, and again, we're having events on that day as well, DORA is live, and that's it. So this is an immovable deadline. It's not like, oh, you start then. You started back on January 16th. Right, 2023. So, you want to know more? Another important date, May 16th. Just go on to CRI.ie and you can meet with me and my team, and we can talk more about DORA and how we can help organizations work with that. We have a DORA solution ourselves, and we have a whole DORA compliance program, and we can help you work within the industry on that. So, what are the key things that you need to know? I've only mentioned DORA, and I mentioned NIS too. What about these on your radar? GDPR, NIS2, EU Cyber Resilience Act, EU Cybersecurity Act, PSD2, the CER Directive. You have to know all of these. There's been a delta that has been created between leaders, between CIO level, CISO level, and so on, and the technical level, and all those people that kind of came up that stream and up at that level, and they don't actually know what these things are, right? And they think it's someone else's job. And they think it's lawyers, or they think it's our compliance people or something like that. Leadership needs to know what these things are because that has to be built into the strategy. That strategy of having a cyber or an IT strategy aligned with your business strategy. If you don't know what these things are and you're meant to be compliant with, how are you building them into innovation? How are you building them into blockchain? How are you building them into AI? Any of these things that you're using, or even just migrating systems and all those kind of things. Really, really important. So, some other key dates. So many of you I know I've met before because at the ICTTF Cyber Summits, which Raysons are always great supporters of as well in place, we would have like, a different kind of event, but we would tackle all these kind of topics. And what we're doing now is we're turning this year's event into an educational curriculum. And what we've done is we've designed out a curriculum. It's aligned with the financial service industry so that people can actually get a qualification out of attending the event and learning through the event, sitting the exam afterwards online through to our Academy portal. And we're going to cover all of those topics in 2 days. All of those topics. We're going to have 50 of the world's best specialists around all of those topics, and we're going to share all of that knowledge because that's essentially the mission of ICTTF now, is be able to share the knowledge, be able to help people collaborate and work through this. And it's to a peer group as well. It's not just coming from on a stage down. It's about people discussing these aspects and how you handle it on that basis relatively. So I would welcome Anybody who wants to meet and talk down at the EU Cyber Summit stand, it's just downstairs as well. My colleague Rhonda's there as well, and we can tell you more about that and how you can get involved as well, because it's a fantastic way of getting clients together, because anybody who's there, they're going to be paid to be there because they want to be qualified in these areas. It's generally a very senior level audience. We get to these events, and we're going to get them qualified around that. So Christine Lagarde might even turn up, who knows? So I will finish on this, and imagine, if you will, the Cranberries is playing now, because that's what's meant to be happening, right? Another belter from 1995. I'm sure this guy said this well before he decided to go to Epstein's Island, but it is still an interesting quote, right? We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Okay? The change is happening. It's already there. The dates are immovable. We all need to harmonize, get our act together, but I leave you with this one thought as a person that kind of wears two hats here, and one of them is as a vendor. I have never seen a bigger opportunity to provide services and solutions to clients than there is with DORA. So thank you very much. Hopefully meet you later in the day, and I'm going to go into the next room now for the next speaker, because I believe he's very, very good. His name is John Byrne. So thanks, guys. Cheers. Thank you.